Hello, everyone, and welcome to part 6 of a series that may actually never end. I guess it depends on how many issues we have on web dev. Anyway, my name is Michael Salati. I am a developer program engineer at Google. I work on the website web.dev, which you can see, actually, camera positioning, but you can see that there. Web dev is pretty much the one-stop shop for everything web developer related, where we provide information on how to improve the performance of your site, how to improve your performance if you're building React or Angular applications. So we have the Learn section where we have these different collections or these contents, these courses, kind of, on different topics. So we have Safe and Secure, PWAs, Web Vitals, which is our some new content we have for building and maintaining healthy websites, Angular, React, Lighthouse. We also host a blog, and the blog is actually the section where we're going to be digging into a little bit, only because you'll notice it right here in the blog that we have these tags. So here there's layout, CSS, Web Vitals, performance, Web Vitals. And those tags are actually really, really relevant because if you click into one of them, it'll actually show you all of the posts that we host on web.dev that include that tag. So here in media, we have profiling web audio apps, ensure your website is available, bunch of different things. But we actually host the tags is kind of a new thing that we supported. While users were able to add tags to their posts, we didn't actually display the tags until maybe a couple of months ago. And even before that, only now do we have tag pages. Like, I think these pages for the tags only became available in March. And there's RSS feeds for the tags, which became available like a couple of weeks ago. But point is, we have a bunch of old content on web.dev that may be tagged, but it's not using the tags that we actually support on the website. So we're going to try to write a linter that's going to go through the posts that have been written, look at the posts, look at the tags that they use, and then if they are using a tag that web.dev doesn't actually support, we're going to throw an error or throw a warning that, hey, unsupported tag. So that's what we're going to look to do. So to get started there, we're actually going to start with the code base, because actually web.dev is a open source project available on GitHub. So if you go to github.com/Google Chrome/web.dev, the entire project exists here. And so let's say if I go into the source folder, go to the site, content, EN for English, because most of the content we have right now is in English, but we're looking to eventually support a slew of different languages. But here we're in English, we'll go into the blog section, and here we'll click color scheme, right? So this is a blog post, it's written as a markdown file. And if I inspect the markdown file, let's see if we can view the raw source code. Here we go. So we have in here this front matter that kind of provides some meta information for the page or for this post. We have our tags here. And so there's blog, CSS, dark mode, dark theme, prefers color schemes, and color schemes. I don't think we actually support all of these tags, and even if we do support some of these tags, they might be variations of a tag we support. I think a really good example of that is, we're going to just search for PWA. There could be posts that we have that are might be using the tag PWA, even though we look specifically for progressive web app. So here, creating PWA with Angular CLI. If I view the raw file, it uses the tag PWA, but and Angular, and I guess that's fine for now, but let's go into the site. I think it's in site, data, post tags. you'll see that we actually don't use a PWA tag for support. We support a tag called Progressive Web Apps. So ideally, we should be able to take this post that says PW has a tag PWA, and like we'll detect, hey, PWA isn't a valid tag, so the user can then go and update the tag to be Progressive Web Apps rather than just PWA. That way, hopefully, we can add the content to the collections, and so we can actually surface it. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna write this linter, and there's actually GitHub issues specific to this. So let's see. All right, so here's the GitHub issue, lint tags for consistency. It's issue 2240, and this is going to be something I'm going to be looking to resolve. There's actually some existing code for linters that we're going to be implementing on web.dev that was written by the team lead, Rob Dodson. So I am actually going to start with his code, and I'm just going to be adding to it to add an additional linter, which is going to be for the tags. So let's open up the pull request open, because I know that's where Rob has it. I believe the pull request is 2758. So here he has a pull request open called add custom front matter linter. And here we go. So this adds a bunch of linting stuff for our GitHub Actions, because we actually run a lot of tests via GitHub Actions when you create a pull request or something like that. So that way, when you create the pull request, we lint it to validate the tag information. So this is where he's doing it. So we're gonna just jump into his branch, and we're going to contribute to that. So the branch is feet/custom linter. So let's get our code base up and running. All right, so here's my terminal. We're going to go into documents, my workspace, and specifically web.dev. Let's open this in Visual Studio Code. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a git pull just to make sure the code I'm working with is as up to date as possible. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to check out into his branch, which is feet custom linter. So let's git check out feet custom linter. All right, so we are in the branch that Rob started working on. Okay, let's actually take a look at the code here to see how he's writing the linters and how we can add to that. And while that's happening, I'm just gonna do a fresh install of my npm dependencies with npm ci. Just because if he added some dependencies or modified them, I want to make sure I'm working with the same resources that he is working with. So let's see what he does. So this PR. In a nutshell, this PR adds a new set of GitHub actions to lint the front matter for our posts and publish a comment to the pull request that lists any failures or warnings. It checks for the following things. It checks all markdown files in the pull request. It verifies the date property is present. If the file has an error, it verifies that all is present. If an added markdown file is added to the PR, it verifies the URL matches the Slugify title. Okay, and verifies the URL contains at least one dash. The viewer can add a lint URL approved. Okay, so there's ways to ignore these things. And if a file is modified, it'll verify that the updated property is present as well. Okay, so this is actually doing a lot that's going to be useful. And I think where I'm going to work is on the added markdown file and the modified markdown file. So if a markdown file, which is effectively a post, is added, I am going to ensure that if it has an array of tags, that the tag is valid. I'm also going to do the same when a file is modified, but I will, as he as he added, a reviewer can add lint URL approved to like ignore an issue. I'm going to do that as well, because some things like the Angular progressive web application post that we had, Angular probably won't necessarily exist as a tag on web.dev in the near future, but it's useful to have because maybe down the road that's going to be a tag we support. So I don't want to necessarily force users to remove them. I just want users to know, like, hey, these tags aren't valid. Check to see if there is a valid tag, just to make sure it's actually surfaced appropriately. All right, I'm going to take a sip of my coffee, and then I'm going to go from there. Okay. All right, that's still installing. So the linters, let's see where he actually writes the linters. So we'll check the change files. These GitHub actions, do I want to do it in GitHub actions? GitHub actions. Yeah, it looks like he writes the tests in the actions file, so maybe that is the right place to write the tests. Just going to skim through the files to see where else stuff happens. GitHub, a lot of GitHub. Is there anything outside of the .github? So he writes the actions for the linters in GitHub and writes tests for the linter. So I guess that's where we're going to be working as well, in GitHub and with the linter. So let's go into the source code. We have our folder.github. We have our actions. We have the folder lint front matter. We have linters, so there's a linter for added files, all files, modified files. So this is probably where we're gonna say, like, hey, if one of these conditions is met, execute or modify the code. As a random aside, I actually need to work on my lighting situation. There we go. But that is an issue for another day. So on added files, we run, let's see, run all added files through a set of rules. So the rules is where we are going to write the linter. So it's a URL matches title and a URL length, and that's in rules. So let's check out the rules, and we'll do URL matches title. Okay, so takes the YAML, has the attribute title, so that's probably just the title that's in the front matter. So I guess the second, yeah, all right, so the second argument is the front matter YAML. That's fine. What else is there? Then there's the actual file, or the file name of the file being linted. I don't necessarily care about the well, I actually do care about the file name. I'll probably be able to use the file name to be able to throw an error or warn the user about something. So I'll probably use that there. Let me just check out the other ones to see. Because I don't necessarily just want to be able to fail a user. I want to sometimes be able to warn a user. So there's an okay and a fail, but I'm curious if there's a warn. So there's a utils status, Okay, so there's a warn message, a fail message, and an okay message. Okay, so this is probably where we can and should work from. So let's just take this rule. No, not this rule. There's one rule that he mentioned that has a override tag. Let's see which rule has the override tag. So the override could be applied to the added. Verify URL contains at least one dash. All right, so there's an override. there's an override for the slugified title. So URL matches title. I don't see the override being applied here, so I'm willing to bet the override is applied to where this gets called. So let's check on the linter for the added file. Okay. And so added file, does it call URL matches? URL matches, URL matches. Alright, so that's URL matches. So if skip tests, it'll skip that specific test. And so where does skip tests come from? Okay, so he has a fixed thing that if it has a label skip URL. Okay, this is a GitHub label. I think this is a GitHub label that it's checking. So context, GitHub context, context payload, pull request label, skip URL label. So that's how that test works. If a user adds a tag to the pull request or a label to the pull request that says skip URL label, then it'll skip. I don't want to do this here because I want to run the test even if the user doesn't care about the result. So like even if the user wants to override the fact that they're using a tag that we're not going to support, I want to still warn the user that, hey, this tag is not supported. So this skip URL test is not going to be applied to us, but let's just write the basics of what this is going to look like. Okay, so URL matches title is a great place to start. So I'm actually going to use it as the initial. Like I'm just going to copy and paste this rule, and then I'm going to modify the rule as needed. So let's copy, let's paste, and let's rename the file to tags are valid. There we go. So here's our tags are valid. The test, it will take the file name, it'll take the YAML, and we'll create a new argument, warn, and we'll set this equal to false, not farce. And so what warn is going to do, it is going to, yeah, no, I want this argument to possibly be here. So warn, this is going to be a Boolean, and don't throw error. Here's the description. Don't throw error when invalid. Tag is used. So that's what it's going to do. It's just going to be a flag. And so what's it going to be return? The result of the check and any failure warnings and messages. Okay, that all works for me. So first thing, we don't necessarily need to worry about the slugified title. Title's going to, we're not slugging the title, we're just testing the tags. We can probably do away with a lot of the file stuff. Or the directory name stuff, because we're not too concerned about that. So what we want, okay, so there's okay status, fail status, warn status. We'll take a look at that in a second. We'll come back to this. So we're going to have an okay status, we're going to have a fail status, and we're going to have a warning status. So utils status just exports as warn. So maybe not, we won't call this warn because we don't want to conflict with it. We'll call it warning flag. Okay. So we have okay, we have fail, we have warn. These are the three conditions we're going to have. So let's create a const here that, and we'll call the const error status. And so what this is going to do is this is just going to be the object we are going to call if there is an error. And so error status will either throw a fail or it's going to throw a warning depending on the warning flag. So if the warning flag is set to true, so if warning flag is just true, then error status is going to be warn. Otherwise, it's going to be fail. Let's comment this up for now. And let's create a placeholder for errors. Errors equals, it's going to be an array. It's going to end up being an array of objects, but it's just an array, or maybe not an array of objects, but it's going to be an array for now. And then we will write a check. So I see here when they have an expected and actual for the fail. I'm wondering how I can return multiple fails. I should check some more of this in a little bit, but we'll get to that in a sec. So let's start to write just the actual check on the YAML to make sure that the content or the tags it has is actually correct. So first thing we're going to do is check if it actually has any tags. So here there's a if hero in YAML. I'm just checking another linter or test to see how that works. So first check we're going to do is if tags in YAML, and if the tags are in YAML, the next check I'm going to do is, actually I'm going to leave that there. I'll write the next check. I guess the next check is to see if the tags is an array. So if array is array YAML tags. So if it's an array, we can work on it. I'm wondering if there's I'm curious if so if it's not an array, do we have, you know what, we're going to go with the condition that a YAML has to be an array. If it's not an array, then we're going to throw an error. So let's throw a warning. So return error status tags was not an array. Okay, and so here they have an expected and an actual. The expected is that the tags this is an array, so expected array dot is array YAML tags equals true, and the actual is going to be false. It's a silly test, but it's a good way to actually test things for the time being, to make sure this linter actually works. And I'll delete this for the time being because I can work with this later. All right, so if there are tags, we go into this test to see if the tags are an array, and if they're not an array, we're going to throw an error. But if they are an array, we can actually test the tags. So I need to test the tags, and I need to get the tags from somewhere. So we actually have a source of truth for all of the tags. And this comes from a post tags file. So we're going to grab that file. Let's see if I can find it. Up one, going up a few. Okay, so we go into the source folder, the site folder, the data folder, and the post tags folder. So let's open up post tags over here. And so this post tags file exports out this post tags object, and this post tags object comes from like this modified object that we have that it adds all these fields and values to the object. So it returns the object that we can actually manipulate. But I can use this to determine if the field exists. So let's take post tags, and so now we can write our test to see if a post actually exists. This is interesting. I'm gonna have to read on how the tests work, because I'd love to be able to actually throw multiple errors. Right now it looks like we only return one error. I want to be able to throw multiple errors. So let's actually take a look at how GitHub Actions works and how these actual errors work. GitHub Actions errors. Actually, it comes specifically from a library. So okay, so the fail is a function that returns an object where it just adds the object with options. I don't use the options, but that's fine. All right. What does it do with the options here? Get it. Get results by status. No. Maybe not modified. Let's check the added files. So the way added files works is that it will run the test and push the result into results, so it gets returned to an array. Ideally, I should be able to return an array of arrays and then just flatten it here. Okay, so what we'll do here, let's start to write these error messages. So next condition we're going to check is if the we'll have to do a for loop. Since we know that the YAML tags is an array, we can iterate through the tags and actually do something with them. So YAML tags for each tag, this should be a string. So we'll just do a check if. What is our if condition? So if we just want to see if the tag exists in a post tag. So if we'll do a not. If tag in post tag. So this is our condition. If a tag is not in post tags, so I just put this little exclamation mark to like flip it. So if tag in post tags is true, we flip it to false, and so this won't execute. But if tag in post tags is false, then it's flipped to true. And so this is the condition that we're catching for. So if the tag is not in the post tag, we're going to add it to our errors. So errors dot push. So we're going to push an element into the array. And what we're going to return is what we're going to push into here is an error message. So here we go. The expected actual doesn't necessarily make sense here. It's just going to be a message, so hopefully we can do away with that. I should also probably get rid of that here as well. So tag, and then we'll give the tag name that the user used. So tag is not found in tag is not found in data post tags. Okay, so this ends up being the error message here. So it'll say that the tag name is not found in data post tags. I'll also just say the file that it was in. Please update file, and that'll be the path with the correct tags. Okay, so this is the rule that we have. I'm just gonna multi-line it so it becomes a little bit easier to read. Okay, so we check if the tag doesn't exist in post tags. If it doesn't exist, we add this error to our errors. So the last thing we're going to do is we are going to return the result of the errors. So what we're going to do is we'll do a check if errors length. So if there are elements in the errors, then we know that we have an array of errors to return, or we have at least one error, one tag that does not match. So errors.length, then we're going to return the errors object. Otherwise, we're just going to return the OK because we don't have any issues with the file. So let's... Does ID get used anywhere? Rules ID URL matches title. All right, so this rule is going to be tags are valid, so we'll save that. So I think this is our base test. What we need to do though is actually execute the test. I'm gonna do away with the warning flag for the time being. Like, though I have the check for the warning flag to give a warning instead of an error, I'm not gonna necessarily write the code for that for the time being. Let's just do our tags test. So const tags tags results. And we need to update that rule, import the rule here. So the file for this is going to be tags are valid. So constant tags are valid. It's going to require tags are valid. And then we can actually just call tags are valid, and we'll give it the file name so we can tell the user where the issue is, and then the front matter. All right. Now, in these other cases, they push the results of the test into this results array, but honestly, that's a better idea of what I'm doing. So what I should do is, this will actually clean up code. Let's rename error to results. Hold on, let me explain why. So the issue. So right now, tags results will either be an object or an array. And so what I'd normally have to do is do a check to see if it's an object or an array. And then push, if it's an object, I can just push the object into the results. If it is an array, I will have to merge or concatenate the arrays. Neither of which are necessarily something I want. I don't want to have to write a check to do either or. So what I could do is ensure that tags are valid will always return an array, and then I can always take that array and flatten it. So we'll rename errors here in the test that we have to rename symbol to results in a similar manner to that they have results here. So now if there's an error, we push results in. And also if the results, if it's not an array, if tags is not an array, then we can also just push the results in. Results dot push. Okay. So if the results has a length, we'll return it. If not, it returns an object. So in this case, we don't really ever do a check to see if the tags are valid. We're only looking to see if tags are invalid. So we never have an OK result that gets pushed in. So we'll just keep the results as for errors. And if there are no errors, so if results length is like empty, we'll return an array with an OK. And I'm realizing because these results are only error results, we'll keep the name errors. But we'll update this so that it's only ever going to return an array, not an array or an object. Okay, so now this rule should return an array of results, I believe. Tags are valid dot test. There you go. So test should return an array of results. Test any array. Test. Okay, typing isn't the best, but that should be right. And so we can just join the array. Now, right now, results is a constant variable. Let's turn that into a let because we're going to reassign it. And there's usually good ways and bad ways for joining arrays. I'm curious what's the best way to join an array here. I'll just do join array. So I could do a spread operator to merge the arrays. What that would look like is I take results and I reassign it to results and tags results. So what that'll do, it'll take the two arrays. It'll basically turn them. I don't know how to describe it well, but the spread operator will effectively allow me to merge these two arrays together by taking the objects or the elements inside of the array out of the array, and then now I'm putting it back into a new array. I think that's a good way to describe it. And you know what? Maybe that's the easiest way to do it for the time being. So let's just leave it like that. So for the added files tests, we do a test for to see if the tags are valid. We add that in, and then we merge that. And so we also want to do this for modified files. So if a file is modified, we want to ensure that it actually has the right results. So let's go into our modified files. We'll add the rule tags are valid. And we'll do the same thing, the same test, kind of. There we go. But results is a const, so let's change it to a let. That way we can reassign the value, and the reassigned value is going to be the merged array of the old results with the new tag results. And I believe the last So we're getting into a good place where I think this test is actually going to work. The only thing we could do additionally is to have the condition for ignoring the linter tag. So let's see what they do here. So for the skipping URL tests, this is to ensure that, like, hey, we'll ignore any changes to a URL because you added this label to your GitHub pull request. We're going to do the same sort of thing here for this. So let's see how he does this. So there's a constant in utilities called skip label URL. And so this is the label that they use. It's in utils constants. So lint URL approved. So we'll call this skip tags label. And lint tags approved. So now we have a tag that if it gets used, will instead of throwing an error, it's just going to warn the user. In the utilities, I am also going to do the skip tag test. So right now he has the skip URL tests as in the added files. And I think that works because the skip URL test is only applied to the added files. My test of the tags is going to be applied to added files and modified files. The hope is when posts get updated for the future, we can prompt people to actually update the tags appropriately. So in our utilities, let's create a new file, and we'll call it skip tags. Skip tags test.js. So instead of skip tag label, skip tags label, that's fine. I'm gonna take the same code that we use for the added files. So he has this function. Here, I'm gonna paste this in here. Skip. Rename it to skip tags test. So context comes from the GitHub context, so I can just import the GitHub context there. Context payload pull request label sum, and then it compares the label to the constant that we have there. So right now there's a skip URL. We're going to use skip tags. All right, let's save that. So that'll do this will write a check. This will go through the tags that this pull request has. It will check if the tag has the skip the tags verification, and if it has the skips tags verification, it'll return a true. Otherwise, it will return a false. So I'm assuming that this labels that we're getting from the pull request is an array, and the sum method of an array will see if anything matches it. If it does match, it'll return true. If it doesn't match, it'll return false. So the condition, it's going to go through all the objects until it finds an object that matches the condition, and our condition is created in the function. So if the label name is the same as the label we defined, then the condition is met. So this is what we're doing. So check if the tags has been approved by the reviewer. This is done through adding a label to the pull request, and this returns a boolean. And so this is still the same. And this is good so far. Okay, so in added files, we can add. I actually need to export this to make sure I am able to use it elsewhere. Okay, skip tags test. So here we go. Module exports. Okay, so now I can import the skip tag test somewhere else. Save that in added files. We'll import it from. I'm realizing skip tags tests might not be the right message because it doesn't really skip the test. It just warns the user, right? So I think I'm going to have to rename this. I guess we'll call it like the warn flag. Warn. No, I'll keep it skips because it's gonna be the label's gonna be skip. It doesn't necessarily skip, but it prevents the error from being thrown. This might have to change. I think for the time being that works okay. So skip tags tests. So let's write some of our code. So here it says added files linting. It's going to lint the files here. It's going to execute. It's going to execute for every file. Skip tags test only has to be called once. We don't need to call it for every file, which has me curious why he calls it here. Okay, so my issue with how skip URL tests is here is that this function is going to be executed for every file that exists in our files, and that doesn't need to happen. Each file doesn't get its own label. The pull request gets the label. So I think this is a place where we can just execute it once and then reuse that variable. So I'm going to modify what he's doing here with that. But before we do that, I will create a variable called skip tags, which will be the result of the test. And let's also do a skip URLs. Skip URLs. Okay. So instead of calling the skip URLs tests method or function every single time, it'll just call it once and then compare it to the result here. It might not be super important. Like the computational difference might not be that significant, considering it's probably just a small array of files that's being modified and probably not that many labels. But it's still like unnecessary computation when we can just store that variable and use it elsewhere. So that's why I've opted to move it there. But we also have our skip tags tests. So let's pass that argument into our tag results. So if this is set to true, instead of throwing an error or failing it, it's going to instead give a warning, just because I think the warnings are valuable here. So that's for added files. Let's add this to our modified files as well. So we have our skip tags test. Let's add that utility here. We have the skip tags variable. Let's add that here. And finally, we can pass skip tags to this. And I don't like this reassign. Let's change that real quick. Const for each result. And that's gonna take our results array and it'll just push in the result there. Again, I'm not sure if this is a better way of doing it. I just don't know if I want to modify this object too much rather than just add objects to it. So let's just copy that here. Okay, so here we should have our test added. I think this is going to work. So let's save this here, and I'm going to run the linters for web.dev, so npm run lint to make sure the code actually looks good. I don't know if the linters... And these are linters that are run locally. These aren't the linters like I'm writing now. It's like saslint, eslint, and stuff like that. But let's see how it gets corrected, and then we can push this up to GitHub, and then possibly see how that works. gotta fix the lighting situation. Okay. So we have a little error. It's all small changes. Like here, this should be const. I'll just let ESLint update the code as needed. Then I'll run the linters again in a sec. Okay, so let's create a pull request and see how this works. Git add the modified files, git commit, it's a test really. Test add linter for post tags for posts. It's possessive for posts tags. Weird commit message to actually write. And let's push this up to GitHub, and so that'll get added to. That'll get added to Rob's pull requests. But before we call it, probably going to actually test to make sure this works as expected. So we'll probably create a fork from here and then modify a file with a tag and see how that works. All right, so feed custom linter, that's all done. Or that's pushed up. So if we check GitHub, let's refresh here. So we had 9 commits. Let's see. There you go. That is my commit. It is failing a test, but we'll get to that later. I wonder why it's failing a test. But this is the test that I've added, or the changes that I've added here. Honestly, why is it failing right away? Unable to verify that I signed the CLA. I don't know why that's an issue, and I am not going to worry about that today. But the other tests for it should be running, so that's fine for the time being. Lint and test expected, waiting for status to be reported. Let's check the checks. Add linter for post tags. Has it executed for anything earlier? Yeah, it's executed earlier, so what? Why is this not an issue? I don't even know if this is a relevant issue. So I am not 100% sure if I will get to a resolution for what's going on here. But you know what we'll do? We'll still create a branch, and we'll see if we can figure if the test actually does something. So git checkout new branch, and we'll call it test post tags linter. Okay, create a new branch here. Let's find a file or a post, and let's modify it so we actually have something to test against. Where do we use tags? We want this to be a markdown file specifically. So source content. Source content. Source site content. Source site content. Here we go. Here is a post. Audit your Angular apps. We have Angular. We have accessibility. Actually, do you know what's a really good one we can do? Keeping with the Angular theme, there was the progressive web application one. So here, create PWA with Angular CLI. So it has the tag Angular and PWA. We don't use PWA. We use progressive. Is it progressive web app or progressive web apps? Here, let's see, because I'm sure there's an example of a PWA tag. Here, it's progressive web apps. So let's just copy that tag name, paste it, save it, git, probably need a modified 2020 0507. This isn't gonna go live, it's just a test. Alright, so git commit test linter. There we go. And let's push this up to GitHub. Alright, it has been pushed up. Let's check GitHub. Post tags, linter. So the linter stuff that we wrote is only going to actually run if it is on a pull request. So we're going to create a pull request. Again, not going to get merged in. This is just more for a sanity check. To master. This is just a test. Do not merge. Let's create the pull request and see what happens. Ideally, we should get a error saying Angular is not a supported tag, but nothing else should throw an error. Lint and task expected. Waiting for status to be reported. All right, CLA. This one says I actually signed it. I'm not sure why the other ones did not say I signed it. Checks. All right, so waiting for checks. I wonder if they're not actually executing or if I'm losing my mind. So I might check the GitHub status to see if there's any issues with the lints and the tests. Status, let's open this up in a new tab. Everything looks good, so these GitHub actions should run. Hopefully, I'm not crazy. Alright, so we'll give this a second and see how that goes. I'm beginning to think there actually might be an issue with the test that it's not being executed, which is odd, maybe concerning, but definitely odd. There was actually an issue earlier this week where the GitHub actions weren't actually running for like a couple of hours, so it ended up being an issue for us. Trying to execute tests and getting stuff merged in. So I'm wondering if we're having a similar issue to that today. Is this test running? Checks. No, doesn't seem like this test is running. Maybe it's not just me, because I actually saw the little yellow icons in a few other places. Example, nope, that's good, that is good. checks. Okay. Okay. Let's here add rum metric vital stuff. Huh. The linter stuff is not running on this, and this is a pull request I did not make. When did this? This is odd. Okay, you know what? This test, actually testing to see if my test worked, might be out of my hands for the time being. It may be something we're gonna have to come back to, but I will say thank you for joining me on building out this linter for web.dev, specifically the web.dev posts. I'll be looking to stream coding on web.dev every Tuesday and Thursday, roughly at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. You can find me anywhere and everywhere on the web. My name is Michael Salatis. And until next time, I hope you guys have an awesome day. See ya.